Physics Bites,
a science podcast in English by the students of Untitled Chapter.
Alright, so we're back for another episode of our podcast. This time we have two new students. We have Rama and Antoine, who did a really nice presentation for us talking about the Manhattan Project, the big scientific project of the 20th century, which led to the creation of the atomic bomb. Hi, guys.
Hi.
All right, so as usual, let's maybe begin with you guys giving us a short summary of what you guys researched and what you guys talked about, and then we'll go to question and answers. How about that?
Yeah?
Yes.
All right.
So,
Antoine?
yes, on a bit of a summary on this topic. I think, long story short, Manhattan Project was a project meant to create a bomb, an atomic bomb to be specific, intended to kill people and to end the war, which it did, but at what cost? It actually started in Germany because it was there that three very clever men called Otto Hahn, Liz Meitner, and Fritz Strassmann discovered the nuclear fission.
Just to be sure, Liz Meitner wasn't the man, right?
Yeah.
So two clever men and one clever woman, right? All right, go on.
And so at the end, the Manhattan Project is a multilingual and global project that costs a ton of money and surely human lives. And the Manhattan Project was both a success and a bloody wart on the history of mankind. Some might say these weapons are mass destruction, might have prevented other wars, but that's on debate we're not going to get into today.
Right, so we wanted to more maybe focus on the scientific side of things because, like you said, the ethical questions around the war are very difficult to avoid and also very difficult to talk about just because it's very hard to say if it's good or bad. There's a lot of good that came out of it, but there's nothing good about having killed hundreds of thousands of people and having unleashed nuclear weapons. All right, so can you guys maybe, Hama, you can give us a little short, brief summary of what happened, the history of this, the story of after the discovery of the nuclear fission, maybe what the different steps were that were taken in the Manhattan Project itself?
So after the discovery of the nuclear fission, the American President Roosevelt decided that the U.S. needed to make a step in this field and to develop a nuclear bomb. So a project was organized with several scientists from all over the world, and notably one called Oppenheimer. And all this project was directed by a U.S. general called
Leslie Groves.
And so they decided to organize themselves to choose sites where they were going to create the bomb. They organize testing, etc., and it finally led to the destruction of two Japanese cities, so Hiroshima and Nagasaki, at the end of the war.
So do you have an idea, can you tell us how long the project took from the time when it was started to 1945, I guess August 6 and August 9 when the bombs were dropped? So around what year did the project start in its earliest phases? Do you guys remember?
I don't exactly remember.
It was around
1980, I think.
1980? No.
1940, sorry.
Right, so 1939,
Yes, so
1940,
around 4
there
or
was...
5 years.
Right, so it took about 4 or 5 years. At the beginning it was more theoretical research, and then by the early 1940s they were actually building stuff. There was a lot of manufacturing that was involved in the creation of this. Any other stuff to add before we maybe move on to the questions? Any other little short details, interesting facts that you guys had uncovered when you did your research?
Maybe the few words that Oppenheimer said, which I think were really hard to hear and to say, when he said, "I've become death, the destroyer of the world."
Right, this is a very famous quote from Robert Oppenheimer, who was the chief scientist in charge of the project. So, an American physicist who later had trouble after the war. I have become death, destroyer of wars. This is a very famous sentence. What does it mean for you guys, this sentence?
A lot of things.
Yeah, such as...
such as the importance one project can have in the history of mankind. Like if the nuclear fission wasn't discovered, maybe our world would be very much different from what we know today.
Certainly, it would be different, not necessarily worse, but not necessarily better either. Maybe that's.
And I think that Oppenheimer realized that science became political, and that when it became political, it was kind of a disaster.
Why do you say it became
because
political?
I think that when he did the nuclear bomb, he knew that it would be damageable, but he realized that if it was used one time, maybe it could be reused, and that we don't know.
So it's like opening up a Pandora's box,
yes,
in a way.
and we don't know who is going to use it, and I think it realized that it could be more than damageable for you.
Right, so it was a dangerous sort of thing to get started. But at the same time, I think you guys mentioned this when you did your presentation. What was the main reason why these scientists pushed the American government to create this project, to create the bomb? Was it, I mean, what was the main reason that they gave? Do you remember?
Yes. So from what we researched on the internet, we found that they pushed very hard on the project, Manhattan Project, because they thought the Germans were ahead of them.
Especially because the discoverers of nuclear fission were German scientists, right? So
and they were actually on a good trail. But it was because of the money and the cost of the facility that they couldn't. Also, the end of the war, it was too early for them.
Right.
It was too late for us.
There's interesting historical documents showing that partially it was because they were losing the war by this point, and there was a lack of money, and this is something that requires a lot of money, and also that maybe Hitler, who had the final decision, preferred to invest this money in other resources, and maybe he didn't believe this. Maybe the scientists weren't as good as the American collection of scientists. What can you tell us about the scientists that were working on this project in the U.S.? Were they all American?
No.
There were Canadian, Australian, Britain,
a lot of Europeans, mostly
of course,
Jewish,
Britain,
who had left Germany
also.
and the German regions because of the Holocaust and all that. So, in a ways, it was maybe the greatest collection of scientists that have ever worked on a single project that we have at least known in our history. Well, if you guys have no more details to add, maybe we can move on to questions. What do you think?
Yeah.
Yes.
All right, let's go to question time. Were there any questions that you guys really liked from your classmates that you found were interesting that you want to start with?
We've got one question that
So who was the question from?
From Meline, but we would prefer if you ask us the question at the end.
Okay. All right. So we'll come back to that question at the end, because I think maybe you have your plan for this. All right. So, what was the cost of the Manhattan Project? Do you guys have an estimate how much it costs? Maybe in today's euros or dollars?
Yes. So in fact, the question I think was in several levels, not only on economical side, but it cost around 2 billion at the time. But in today's money, it's around 25 billion.
Right, 25 billion.
it's a lot, but I think that I research what is the cost of a spaceship, for example, to know if it's reasonable or if it's a lot in the science field. But I think that it's a lot, but not too much. I don't think that 25 billion represents a lot in today's.
I guess it depends on the context, right?
Yes,
I think for a science project, it would still today be considered as huge. We just talked last week about the space telescope, the James Webb Space Telescope that was sent into space, which cost something, I think, like $14 billion, which is probably one of the most expensive science projects. Just to put that into context, it would be 25 billion would be a huge chunk of the French GDP, right? So as a money going into one single project, it's pretty huge. So that's the financial cost. So as you said, the question was from Kelly and Aurora. So the question was not just the cost in terms of finances, but also the human cost of it, the material cost, the environmental cost. Do you guys have any ideas of the size of this project on these different levels?
Yes. So the Manhattan Project. 130,000 people worked on the project.
Right, so this is not just scientists, but there's lots of manufacturing going on, lots of building of engineers and technicians and just manual workers. So 130,000, that's a lot of people.
Yes, and in terms of materials, a lot of uranium was, of course, needed.
Yeah.
And I think that Groves made a command to Congo of several billions. I think it's 4.8, but I'm not sure.
Yeah.
4.8 billion of of kilograms or tons. I think
tons would be too much, I think.
Kilograms of uranium
Okay.
for the project.
Just so we're clear, we're talking about uranium ore. So
Yes.
this is what's extracted from the ground, and then so let's stick to the technical side. When we take uranium out of the ground, can we just use it to make a bomb?
No.
Or are there steps to?
No,
There are different
Antoine?
steps to purify the material.
Right. Can you just give us a general, maybe short?
So the
idea?
principle of the purifying the ore, we don't really know the mechanisms,
Right.
But
what do we need to get out? What is the useful part of what we take out of the ground that we use for a bomb?
the element uranium 235,
Right, it's a
and
specific
plutonium,
isotope of uranium.
239.
Right. Now, plutonium is an artificial element that was made at that time, but let's stick to uranium. What is uranium-235? What does that mean when we say uranium-235?
An isotope of uranium.
Right, so the 235 is a reference to what aspect of uranium? Do you remember?
235 neutron?
Not neutrons, but nucleons. So it's like
Nucleon.
protons and neutrons, right? Is there a lot of uranium-235 in just natural uranium? No, it's about... Does anybody remember what percentage of natural uranium is uranium-235? No? All my students that have been working on with this for 2 years? No? Nobody remembers? Awesome. So about 0.7% is uranium-235. And to make a bomb, I remember you talked about critical mass or critical density.
Yes.
What percentage does it have to be of uranium-235 for it to become usable as a bomb?
At least 90.
Right, so between 80 and 90%. So naturally we have about 0.7%. To make a bomb, we have to be about 80 to 90%. What is the name of that process that we use to produce such highly enriched uranium?
Purifying?
Not purifying, but we call it enrichment. Right?
Enrichment.
So we hear it all the time in the news. Milan is very frustrated because he had the answer, I think, and he wanted to talk, but he'll get a chance to talk next week. So they had to develop a method for taking just natural uranium, extracting the uranium from the ore, and to convert this very low percentage of uranium-235 to something that's very rich in uranium-235. Do you guys have any idea what the names of the bombs were that they made? How many bombs did they make in total?
Yes. They made 3.
3.
Yes.
So do you remember what the names were?
The one that was launched on New Mexico.
Yeah, the test one.
Yeah. We don't.
I don't know.
It didn't have
It's
any.
Trinity, right?
Yes, Trinity. Yeah.
The test
Like in the
tube,
Matrix.
yes, okay.
Yeah.
And the 2 other
others
bombs.
Are Fat Man and Little Boy.
Right. And do you remember why they were called Little Boy and Fat Man?
I I read it, but I don't think I remember. But it's because of the size and
the shape.
The shape
Right.
of it.
So Fat Man was this very spherical bomb, and this was the one that was more difficult to make because it had to have a very specific mechanism for it to implode, and the other one was okay. Anyways, do you know if today there is anything remaining of the installations that they used to make the bomb? Do you know where they worked on this?
I think I know two sites,
Yeah.
Anford and Oak Ridge, I think.
Yeah, so Oak Ridge, I think it was in Tennessee where they were making
I
the
don't
enrichment.
really remember.
What was the name of the main laboratory where they were working on this
Oh.
in New Mexico?
Mordo, I think.
Los Alamos.
Los Alamos, that's right, which is
Okay.
today is a very huge laboratory, national laboratory, where there's lots of really interesting researches going on nuclear fission and fusion and all these other stuff. All right, so there's a good question from Antoine and Moenis. Are the consequences of these explosions, I think the question is about the two bombs that were dropped over Japan, are the consequences of these explosions still measurable today or not?
So not really,
Mm-hmm.
but the consequences were measurable for a long time after
Right.
the bombing.
So what are the main consequences of this bomb? What are these things that we can measure? What is it that
Radiation.
the radiation, right? The levels of radioactivity. Do any of you guys want to just give us a little short reminder of what radioactivity is?
So radioactivity is a state of matter.
Not really a state of matter. It's something that happens
Yes.
to atoms. What is it?
Different rays. They have a lot of energy,
Right.
and so they're not stable.
Right. It's the
So-
instability of an atom,
Yes.
a nucleus. That's the reason why we have
And
radioactivity.
in our world of physics, all the atoms and elements and matter in general tend to search for what's the term? When you for a stable state.
Right. They want to be
Yes.
find the most stable state.
So
That's
as
right.
they have a lot of energy, they want to lose this energy
Okay.
by any means.
Right.
One of those are the rays. So they let out a lot of rays, beta rays, alpha rays, and gamma rays.
Right. Which are different kinds of radiation.
Yes.
Okay.
And so each one of them are more or less dangerous.
Okay. So basically, the question of radioactivity boils down to the stability of atoms, and some atoms are very stable, and heavier atoms like uranium are not very stable. And when the nucleus is not very stable, it can sometimes just very spontaneously sort of break in two. And when it breaks in two, it gives out this radiation, which we call radioactivity. All right, so and so if the bomb had radioactive materials, when it explodes, this radioactive material stays there, and maybe years later there's still some radioactivity. I remember reading something that in the site where they did a test for Trinity, even today you can still measure the radioactivity that's in the ground, right? So yeah, there was 2 or 3 questions about the various types of nuclear bombs that we have. What are the 2 main types of nuclear arms that we have? So there's the nuclear fission bomb, that was the one that they produced in the Manhattan Project, and then there's a more powerful one that was developed a few years later,
Fusion bomb.
the fusion one, or the thermonuclear bomb. What can you tell us the very basic difference between these 2 types of processes, or do you guys
I'm not very scientific, so I don't really know. But I think that fission is when it
splits?
when it splits, and
Yeah.
fusion is the contrary.
Right.
But I think that fusion can be more dangerous than the fission one.
I think so. Fusion is a process that produces more energy than fission.
Yes.
And fusion, we talked about it because one of your classmates, a group of your classmates, were talking about it when they were talking about the formation of stars and how stars work. That they mentioned that fusion is what powers the star. So a thermonuclear bomb is basically a tiny star that we make ourselves. Are there any other questions that you guys found interesting that maybe you want to bring up?
Maybe the question of Max and Gaspar to
Yeah.
when they asked, did the Manhattan Project change the way we organize scientific research today?
And that's a very interesting question. It's more like not the actual bomb, but the actual consequences of this big scientific project. So, what do you guys think? This is kind of an opinion question. Do you think that there was a before Manhattan Project and then there's an after?
I tend to say yes,
Okay.
that we tend a bit to share technologies
Right.
more than before, and knowledge also.
Right. I guess it's a more industrial approach
Yes.
also maybe to research. Yeah.
Although it's not a habit for certain countries. So more seriously, I think we see more and more science project collaboration with
Right.
other countries, like for example ITER,
Yeah.
with all the countries such as France, the US, Canada, Japan,
European
China
countries,
too, which is surprising. And although the CERN
Yeah.
in between Switzerland and France.
Right, which is the European Center for Nuclear Research.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I think what's good with these collaborations between scientifics and science is that it crosses the boundaries that politics puts, because I think we think in our group that science is universal and it deserves to be
Right.
shared to everybody.
So you think that science should not be bound
No.
by countries and by national borders? It should be an international, like a human project more than like a national project, right? And it's your opinion that the Manhattan Project sort of helped with that in a way? In a
Yes,
way- Okay.
it
How about-
divided, but it united too.
Yes, I agree with
So, you seem a bit hesitant, Rama.
But I think that the reason, but the Manhattan Project created the bomb atomic, and the bomb atomic kind of destroyed a part of the world. So I don't think that it's only the true reason why.
We do research
Yes.
the way we do today.
Yes, I
Okay,
think that's.
so you think that we do research in a way that's similar to the Manhattan Project, but that's not
Yes.
the cause of it.
But that's not the only cause. At
Right,
least,
that's
I
not
think.
the only cause. Right, okay. Can you guys maybe talk about the positive aspects of the Manhattan Project outside of, well, I guess defeating. Well, did it help defeat Nazi Germany? Did the Manhattan Project help
yes.
defeat Nazi Germany, or not really?
Not really. Like it didn't change a lot of things in the German war. Just they were a bit stressed out to see the US being more and more advanced.
Well,
Than
I think you can answer more
Like-
definitively because it's a very historical question, right? So when did when did Germany sort of concede the war?
It's,
In 1945. Do you guys remember the
It's,
date? Somebody, Max, do you have an idea?
It depends in function of the armies, but between April and May 1945, and I think that in Berlin they calculate around the 8th of May, maybe?
Right, the 8th of May, which is the day we celebrate as the official end of the Second World War. And the 8th of May 1945 is a few months before the bomb was dropped. So, in a way, the Manhattan Project was conceived of as a way to sort of defend against a potential dangerous attack from Germany and I guess the Axis forces. But in the end, the war ended, at least in Europe, before even the bomb was tested, because the bomb was tested in July of 1945. So it didn't really contribute to the end of the war. So why then was the bomb dropped? Do you have a
It was
Um,
to stop
opinion on
the,
this?
I think that it's because Japanese were very consistent, and I don't know if the term is appropriate, but motivated to pursue
Right.
the war,
Right. So
and that the US wanted it to end as quickly as possible.
So
because,
right, so we have to recall that then the war ended in Europe, but it was still going on with Japan, which was against the Allied forces, and so I think in that sense you're right. It wanted to end the Second World War, not necessarily the European part of it. What do you think about the fact that there was the one bomb dropped on the 6th of August, and everybody in the world saw what it did, and then 3 days later they dropped the second bomb? Do you think it was necessary for the war to end? Was it sort of gratuitous? It's a very sort of emotional subject, right? So what is your opinion on this?
Well, the US bombed a second time Japan because they didn't surrender the first time. But I think that in 3 days, well, maybe the US could have waited a bit more because in the end, the Japan would have surrendered anyway. I think even if only
already most of the cities were destroyed by this point because of the war and the bombing conventional bombs. Do you think that maybe having used the bomb twice, the good thing that came out of it is that we have never used the bomb ever again since that time? Now that we've seen what it has done, could that be a good thing out of it? Or I'm sure the Japanese would not agree, but if we want to take the long view of this?
I think that the second launch of the bomb wasn't so much for the Japanese, but it was to show the world the US's power and dominance. So it was a double aspect.
Right, so it was almost like a very sort of a morbid political check game. Okay. What about the years after? Once the war was over, the bombs were dropped. Did any good things come out of the Manhattan Project?
Well, in the medical field, I think that the nuclear aspect, the nuclear medicine is kind of revolutionary, and the laser, you spoke of it last week.
So there's a lot of new science that was discovered during this and new technologies, which in the end have been used for good stuff. So maybe if we hadn't had the Manhattan Project, we would have not discovered or invented these technologies. So maybe we can finish on the question that you were saving for the end.
The question.
So what was the question exactly?
The question of Meline was, do you think that it is right that physics is used for these ends?
Right, so this is the eternal question, is science good or bad or beyond all that? So what did you guys think of that? It's a good question.
So at the end, no, definitely. Who would want to wipe out an entire city with just one or multiple bomb? No sane person would. But seen from the future in 2022, it's rather easy to judge and want to remake a bit like history. But in order to see in the world nothing is good or nice, like there isn't any bad guys from one part and good guys from the other. It's just a question of interest. And in the world, I think like everybody wants a piece of the cake, but there isn't
enough cake for everybody.
Yeah, enough cake for everybody. So I think our job as like the new generation, and also what you did when you were our age, is to not so long ago, I think, but it's to share as well as we can the cake. With everybody in the world.
So this comes back to the idea of sharing technology and not keeping science and technology for ourselves. All right, well, that's there's so many questions we can ask, but let's stop at this point. We've already gone nearly half an hour. That was very interesting. I know personally it's a topic that for me is very interesting. I hope you guys found it interesting as well. There's so much stuff to talk about. You can have debates about various aspects of this, but it's very, very good. So thank you very much, guys. Great job as usual, and next time we're coming back with Nicolas and Milan, who are going to talk to us about something much more outside of the realm of ethics with cosmic microwave background radiation. Alright, thank you very much, and see you guys next time.